And we're looking at the next topic, which is the importance of planning strategically is not lost on any of us gathered here today, I am sure. However, Ms. Gina Matthew, Associate Partner at Ernst & Young, Trinidad, will now join me today to elevate the discussion a step further and speak to the best practices and approaches to ensure that the most value to be obtained in the long term is realized. Gina has over 20 years experience serving clients at various stages of mergers and acquisition transaction cycle, and has also provided strategic advisory services to clients on their own growth strategies, business pursuits, and diversification opportunities across the Caribbean. Gina, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Wendy.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Good. And I just want for the record to say that I'm not wearing shorts.
Neither am I, so we're okay.
Okay, good.
All right, awesome. So I hand over to you, Gina.
Okay, thank you. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so good morning, everyone. It is really great to be here. I really enjoyed, the last day session. And of course, as Wendy said, we had some spirited discussions a little while ago. So just to kind of keep the momentum, as Wendy mentioned, I am going to focus more on the strategic side of things. And I'm going to do that, first of all, by sort of painting a picture, creating a context, because at the end of the day, when you're looking at strategy, you really have to look at, what is your context. So over the last 22 months, we have been sort of navigating this, space that we're in. And for most banks and really most businesses, we're looking at a three-phase process. So initially, we're looking at it now when the pandemic first hit, and the focus there was really assessing and stabilizing. For most banks, the focus would have been on people, their safety, as well as customers, also helping customers in terms of their hardships. I know in many jurisdictions, in most cases driven by the regulator, there were moratoriums given, etc. So banks really step up to the plate to help customers where that is concerned. And also to trying to, I guess, push people out of the banking halls onto the digital platform. So there was a lot of uncertainty and, stabilizing at that now stage, which would have lasted, 4 or 5 months into the pandemic. And then, we moved or transitioned into what we call the next phase. And that is where, we have stabilized the business and we're looking at really our digital footprint and really trying to see how we could sustain the momentum of moving people from the banking halls into, online and digital platforms. Certainly, what we saw in most banks is an acceleration in your digital agenda. We basically forced into looking at the digital agenda right away because of what the pandemic brought. And then I think it's safe to say that we're really, on the cusp of the beyond phase, which, yesterday's topic was dealing with the beyond. And there were a number of themes that came out in the discussions between yesterday and today around this beyond. And when we talk about beyond, from where I sit, is really reimagining and reinventing. I think it's safe to say that the COVID pandemic has really allowed us to rethink from a personal perspective, from a business perspective, and certainly from a society perspective. So we're seeing a lot of talk, basically most of yesterday on transformation. And in most cases, when we talk about transformation, the focus, the conversation, the narrative is usually around new technology. We did speak about process and, of course, focusing on the customer experience, which is so very important. And then we, of course, spoke about risk from the cybersecurity perspective as well as the regulators. And we have seen a significant increase from where we sit of M&A transactions within the region, in the financial services sector, as well as other sectors. In our US market and other markets, other developed markets, and even LATAM, the M&A market has really, really heated up. And so our region is no exception. We met with the panel yesterday morning, and then, of course, today, sharing their experience on their acquisition strategy. Now, all this is well and good, and we've had a lot of discussions on this. But when we look at beyond, we really have to look at it, as I said, excuse me, in context. Now, we obviously, I think uncertainty is a word that describes the situation that we are still in. And the reason why uncertainty has been so much amplified is that one of the big lessons that COVID has taught us is that we are so very connected, as this graphic illustrates. So that when we speak about recovery and full recovery, clearly some sectors would have been less affected by the pandemic than others. So, the question is, would we ever get back to full recovery in terms of some sectors? There would be some sectors that would change, that, would have had permanent changes. So when we look at uncertainty, we really have to look at, when we are reimagining our beyond, we have to consider the wider ecosystem. We have to appreciate the fact that even though we may be, a banks operating in the financial sector, that we would obviously be impacted by society and what happens from a social perspective, of course, economic, government. I mean, governments have really had to step up to the plate and would have spent significant amount of money really just, trying to keep the various jurisdictions and countries alive. We also have on the consumer side and on the business side. So when we talk about the beyond and when we are reimagining the beyond and we're speaking a lot about transformation, we obviously need to understand that we're still in a state of uncertainty. And we have to consider, all of the various elements in our ecosystem when we are looking at what it takes to reimagine the beyond. Now, usually when we think of time, we think of time in a linear direction. But the shape of change has changed significantly. And COVID has just amplified that even more so. Change is no longer linear, right? We are looking at exponential change. And I mean, just ask COVID-19, right? With all the new variants coming on stream, you eat Delta variant, for example, right? You can transmit it. It's a lot more infectious than the first strain. So even viruses are going through this type of shape of change. So when we are looking at strategy and when we are looking at reimagining our beyond, we have to understand that we cannot take the posture of looking back and thinking that change happened in a linear format. We have to really appreciate what is really happening with the pace of change. And just to show a little example here, when we look at the mobile phone, in 2008, this shows the usage by hour for each adult. This is in the United States of America on various devices, right? So in 2008, only a small portion of 2.7 hours per day was spent on the mobile phone. Right, that's probably minutes if you just look at the size of the bar. But look at what has happened 10 years after the fact. Now the desktop and laptop hasn't really changed significantly. You're seeing a slight decline, but certainly what has happened on the mobile side is that it has increased the number of hours that persons, then this is per day, spending on digital media, right? Now, we talk about Africa and we talk about the leapfrogging from a fintech perspective. And, one of the reasons that, is usually discussed for that is because they had a huge unbanked population and the fintechs were really able to come in there and, have obviously very successful results. But really and truly, what drove that change is not that they had a huge unbanked population. Obviously, that contributed. But it was the fact that most people had access to mobile phones. So without it, we would not have seen that leapfrogging impact. So I say that to say this, right? We have to understand, too, when we are looking at the beyond, and we saw the shape of change, look at these entities here, which of course, I mean, these are all, digital platform focused. Airbnb and WhatsApp and Instagram and Uber all came on stream when people were only spending, less than an hour on mobile devices. But of course, so clearly they saw something we did not see. So the point here is that we have to be able to really pick up the weak signs and really understand what is happening around us. So when we talk about reimagining our beyond, we cannot just speak of transformation and how we're dealing with our people, etc., in and among ourselves, but we really have to have a great appreciation of what is really happening all around us, right? So just by way of information, on Google Play, there are 3.48 million apps, and on the Apple Store, trailing behind, are 2.22 million apps, right? So we spoke also a lot about customer experience. And again, this is very important. And it's a focus that most banks are, really looking at because of the disruption in the market. So when we see things like 67% of customers saying that they expect a better experience now than say 10 years ago, that is something that we need to be very, very aware of. When we see 72% of business buyers expect vendors to personalize experience to their personal needs, we have to take account of that, because if we are looking at transformation, and a lot has been said about transformation and technology, and really and truly, transformation, technology is not transformation, and transformation is not all about technology. 80% of customers say that the experience a company provides is more important or as important as the products and services, right? So I can go on and on, but I just want to make one point here, which is half of the world's population is expected to be on smartphones by this year. Right? So again, understanding the dynamic and understanding when we're looking at reshaping and when we're looking at our transformation and we're looking at our technology, which is what just enables transformation, is our technology, is our transformation, taking into consideration these trends, because we see the shape of the change, right? So, in the past, we would say, well, this is not going to affect the region. We tend to lag, maybe 2 to 3 years. Not anymore. And we're seeing it. We're seeing the disruption taking place. So it's very important. 73% of persons between 18 to 34 are willing to buy a financial product from a tech company, right? So we need to be very mindful of that. Another important scenario here, if we look at 2025 projected, we're seeing, significant fallout again from the disruptors in the market on revenue lines for financial institutions, right? Where we're seeing payments, and we know that the disruptors are really, full force in the payment space. 34% reduction in revenue by 2025, right? So when we talk about integration, we talk about M&A strategy, and we are talking about acquiring, we need to also understand, as we get bigger and we have larger balance sheets, what is happening? Are we going to be able to generate the returns from a, cash flow revenue perspective if, this is what the trend is? So it really forces us to really understand what is this beyond that we want to imagine. On the people side, right, we see here that, and again, this is just the COVID experience, and this is this is not shocking news for anyone here. I'm sure that a data compiled by Microsoft Teams show that workers have been significantly more meetings and managing more incoming chats now than before COVID, right? So burnout is very high. What we're also seeing too is that people are getting comfortable, and this point was made, I think, in the panel discussion yesterday. People are getting comfortable with this, work from home scenario. So the question, and also they are not settling. In the US, there is a big problem now because they have more people quitting jobs than ever before, because people are saying that if you're not prepared to give me the flexibility, then, or if I don't feel that my work is providing me with purpose, then maybe I should not be working at this particular establishment. People are making choices. You have digital nomads, people who are just their employment allows them not to be in a particular country, and people are now traveling, right? So we also have to look at the impact on our people, and also our customers people. So in our lending, etc., when we are looking at risk, right? Because in many cases, we're still at a stage where we want collateral, and usually the collateral is property. So if my collateral is commercial property, and businesses now are saying, okay, we are going to a hybrid scenario, then you're looking at reduced space. What impact does that have on your loan portfolio? So it's important to understand when we are looking at transformation, when we are looking at the beyond, we need to understand what is happening around us, right? So that's on the people's side. So the question is, what do we do? How do we really imagine the beyond? And it's an important question. And I will tell you, it's not about technology. I think Wendy made a point this morning. I think it was a point that was made on the panel yesterday morning, that, the skill set, particularly at the C-suite, may change from, the traditional accountant, finance person, to maybe more IT, maybe more, technology. I don't think I necessarily agree with that, because I think what is required, and it could come from accountants. I know, I'm an accountant by profession, and some of the most creative people are accountants, right? So I think what is required is not necessarily a more IT people or people who know about technology. It is people who are strategic, in thinking. People who have, the Ubers of the world, the Instagrams of the world. Now, yes, that is powered by technology, but who came up? Technology did not come up with the concept, right? Someone realized that, okay, I have a home, and why don't I just, I'm not here 6 months of the year, let me, make some money. And Airbnb was born, and it disrupted the whole hospitality sector, the whole sharing, economy. Look at electric cars. If we think a step ahead, so it's not just looking at what's ahead, right in front of us, but what is the impact, for example, of driverless cars? Okay, well, you're driving around, we have no drivers, right? But what is the impact for a bank? If we have driverless cars, well, and okay, why don't we share our cars? I don't need to have my car park up, or, in my garage, 10 hours for the day if I'm working from home, etc. It can be used, and shared with somebody else. So what does that have? What impact does it have on car loans? Are we going to see that with a lot less people wanting cars? What impact would it have on the insurance sector? So we have to look at not just what is before our eyes, but we really have to look at what is the impact of the next impact, right? So it's more really looking strategically, and I think that can come from any skill set, and it doesn't necessarily have to come from an IT skill set, because at the end of the day, technology is really the enabler, right? You still need to have the concepts. You still need to be ahead of the competition. You still need to be reading the market. So when we look at beyond, and when we look and see what's happening in our region, we really have to, push the button a little more, and push ourselves really to kind of get beyond just, okay, well, we want to transform, we want to, block the fintechs or partner with the fintechs. We want to give our customers, the best experience. We want to give our employees the best experience. We want to grow. But the question is, why are we doing this, right? So most companies know what they do. If you don't know what you do, well, then, clearly you have a problem, right? But all organizations on the planet know what they do. They know what services, they know what products that they provide, and they know how. right? And the how comes not only in terms of how you perform, but also in your enabling environment. So your how will be, your employees enable you to do your what, your technology, your processes, etc., etc. So that's your how. However, very few organizations can say why they do what they do. In other words, what is their purpose? Why do they exist? So what we are seeing now is a move in strategic thinking where we are looking and really putting purpose at the head. So purpose, think of purpose as your lighthouse. Think of purpose as the light that is going to be shining the path. Think of purpose as what you hang your hat on. Think of purpose as what your employees every morning when they get up from their bed and they come to the office. Oh, this is why I am here. So that is what we mean by purpose. And there are a number of forces that are at play here, really pushing businesses to say, hey, what are you really all about? What is really your purpose? And purpose, because it's so, ahead and it's really your guide, it's hinged on delivering long-term value across. And this is where the shift is. It's not shareholders, it's all stakeholders. Because remember, I showed you the ecosystem and how everything is so interconnected. It's important, right? For full recovery to happen, it means that all sectors need to recover. Nobody needs to be left behind, right? And so what then, as a financial institution, if we are less affected by it, what can we do to bring the others along, right? And that is what we mean by really delivering long-term value across our stakeholders. Two of the biggest, drivers that is really pushing this really train of thought is the changing demographics. Millennials will tell you they want to work for a company where they feel there's a sense of purpose. They want to be able to know, well, why am I here? So purpose is very important for them. Climate change is also driving this purpose conversation, and it's driving the conversation along long-term value. Within the, I know I make no excuses for this, within the Caribbean region, let's just start with our politics. Our politics are very short-term focus. Right? Okay, you have 5 years, right? Let me try and win. And if lucky, I go to the end. But it's always on a 5, 5, 5, 5, right? So naturally, and it goes for even for a company that is looking at their strategic plan, it's usually for a window. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but you need to always have your lighthouse, right? Because that is what anchors you when all the waves are hitting against the rock. You have your lighthouse, right? So investors are also asking, so, what are you really driving here, the value? Employees as well, really asking that question. I will share an experience from an EY perspective when we were hitting very low numbers in our employee survey on the level of engagement. And, a couple of years ago, I think it might have been close to maybe 5, 6 years ago, global practice said, what, we really need, our employees are saying they don't know why they're here. And we spent a lot of time really working on our purpose and defining what that is. And the year after the survey was run, it was amazing how those scores really escalated and improved from prior positions. So the issue, though, which I will get into in a little bit, is how do you measure? And that is always the temptation, because we find, and that is always, we take, I guess, the quick way out, because we can't measure it. So I don't know how to measure that. How am I going to measure that? So let's not even worry about it, and nobody else really worrying about it, right? But people are worrying about it. Investors, employees, and consumers, right? And this is global. This is very new to the region. They are speaking in the US, right? Environmental climate issues. Your investors 59% want to know what is your strategy? What is your agenda on climate change and sustainability? And I'm telling you, which I will show in a little while. I know that there is a session on that later today, so I'm not going to share a whole lot on it, but I will give you, a couple of quick facts to really drive the point home that we really need to be thinking of this. We can't say, well, throw away, we have 3 years to wait, and no, right? Board diversity, right? So we're looking at, how diverse is our board? I will show you in a sec a quick survey we did with the CAB members where we showed that we have great representation from women on the executive and management team, but when it comes to the board, there's lacking. There's work to be done where that is concerned, right? So the point here is that our stakeholders are asking for it from our employees, our customers, etc. So when we are doing our journey for our customer, so we want to transform the customer experience, right? We have to be mindful of the fact that they are calling for this, right? So we need to understand that, and we need to be able to measure it, and very importantly, communicate it, right? Because we could be doing it, but nobody knows. So it's very important that it's communicated as well. So this is just a quick little chart that shows sort of like, I would say, the history in terms of strategic thinking, etc. We have the 5 forces, we have the matrix with the cows, the stars, etc. But really and truly, where this is going is a drive towards looking at the long-term value, right? And so when we talk about purpose, what do we mean? So there's a definition here, and it's an organization's aspirational human first reason for being. So in other words, why are we, why do we exist, right? And important to understand, as I mentioned before, is that there is a shift from shareholders to stakeholders. But that comes with challenges, which I will get into in a little bit. COVID, just like how digital agendas have been just moved to the front because of COVID, this has now been moved to the front. And of course, as I mentioned before, the whole issue around climate change has really, moved the whole purpose discussion and really creating long-term value that you're creating for your stakeholders rather than just your shareholders. That has come to light, right? So it's really moving from a financially driven strategy to one that is guided by purpose, as I mentioned before. So just so that we are not confused, right, we still have our vision and mission. Those don't leave, and get thrown in the bin. We still have those, but purpose is really what guides you. As I mentioned before, it's above everything. So when you are coming up with your purpose statement, it really needs to be very, very broad, but speaks to really why you exist, right? So you have your mission. So your purpose guides you. Your vision is what you aspire to. So it's the results that you want to reach for that, can be measured and obviously achieve why you exist, right? Mission is your day-to-day. That is what drives you. So purpose guides you. Vision aspires, you aspire to be what your vision says, and mission really drives you. And of course, your core values sets your behavior within the organization that obviously has to cascade first and foremost with your purpose. And then you have your strategy, which of course is the execution, tells you what you are going to be doing. And then of course you have your execution to achieve long-term value. So it's not, as I said, mission, vision, values, etc. It's not corporate social responsibility. It's not about that. It's not, your tagline. It's really focused heavily on the human aspect of your business. And by human, we're talking about your employees, your customers, wider society, and very importantly, your impact in society. So these are just, I'm just going to go through them quite quickly. Some purpose statements for some well-known brands. Is we see Amazon here to be Earth's most customer-centric company. So it's very broad. So as I mentioned before, what the long-term value does is it really opens up to your stakeholder and really understanding what your landscape is. And it's along four value dimensions or four value pillars, if you want to call it, in terms of measuring long-term value. You have your customer value, your people value, and the biggest change really is your value to society and financial value. That's what we do, right? We have strategic goals. Yes, they all financial. If you look at annual reports, it's very heavy focus on the performance, the financial, what we want to achieve, very focused. Yes, we have our CSR, but again, it's not this long-term value. It's not just CSR, right? It's how are we empowering the other members in our stakeholder pool, because at the end of the day, as COVID has taught us, we're all in this together and we're so interconnected that for us to be, to reach our full potential, it means that the other stakeholders must also reach their full potential. So it's definitely a change in focus. And this is where it gets a little tricky. And this is where the whole concept is really evolving, because it's not something that you can easily, from a quantitative perspective, measure. Now, I have assets and liabilities on your balance sheet. It's very easy to measure, but there are intangibles, and many of these are intangibles that you don't see on your balance sheet but has value. But if you don't, identify those intangibles, and if you don't communicate to the stakeholder pool, well then, it's not going to be something that is seen, and therefore not something that is perceived to be value add, right? So I'm not going to go through this, but I mean, in terms of looking at metrics, a little different than, the typical KPIs that we would look at, but it's really focusing. So in your customer value, we're looking at customer lifetime value. How long have you, journeyed with this customer, and where were you in their key milestones in their life, right? In terms of people, learning and development is a big area. Empowering, diversity, leadership. Are we creating, leaders within our organization? So in society, you would see there's a heavy focus on environment, human rights, and of course, with COVID, we had the Black Lives Matter. So all of these are very topical, and what our investors, customers, employees are saying, our stakeholders, is that we need to start, measuring these things, and we need to start holding businesses accountable in terms of, are they providing long-term value for the wider society? And of course, the financial value, I mean, this is kind of where most of us focus, but there is a shift. And what we have seen in our research from an EY perspective, is the ability, as I mentioned, to attract top talent, because people know that you have a purpose. And especially at the millennial and now the Generation Z, they really want to be involved in an organization that has a purpose and also fulfilling that purpose. There is customer loyalty. Investors are now being attracted to companies that have a strong purpose, right? So it does have an impact. It does have a qualitative and quantitative impact that we have seen in terms of moving the shift from shareholders to stakeholders. So as I end, I just want to just spend 2 minutes on one of the big drivers of this, which is the climate change, right? And we know about, global temperatures. We know that it's really a crisis. And, there are a number of private, public, multinational countries, etc., getting involved. But look at this statistic. Emissions from emerging and developing economies are projected to grow by 5 gigatons, in contrast to advanced economies that are projected to fall by 2. So what this is saying is that, okay, so the developed companies may be there and they may be up and doing and, very heavily involved in climate change, etc. But if we, the emerging and developed economies don't also do our part, well then, as we say in Trinidad, you'll be spinning top in mud. So it's important. I think this is a very important statistic, and it should be a call to action. So as a bank or a business, where do I play, right? How can I come to the table and really impact that statistic? Because guess what? If we don't impact the statistic, guess which regions are going to be most impacted? We're going to get a lot more hurricanes and adverse weather conditions. So it's not only we have to, but it's also in our best interest, because as banks, we clearly, will suffer if our country is hit with hurricanes. We have, people lose their jobs, businesses go out, etc. There's usually a long recovery, and we have seen it with many islands. After a significant hurricane passing through. So that is very important. So as a bank, we really need to ask ourselves, what can I do? And to be honest, it's the ecosystem for this is evolving. And certainly within our region, it's fairly, I would say, this is my opinion, a little disorganized in terms of, you have private sector, you have the multinationals that are coming to the table and providing, concessionary funding, etc. And then you have some banks actually also have started conversations, are playing in the space, have made certain commitments. We're seeing that. But what we tend to hear a lot from the the entities, whether it's banks, etc., that are financing these, because most of these are startups, right? Young companies, etc., is that they don't have bankable projects. So the question is, are we applying the same risk, the same criteria, right, that we would for entities that may, in sectors that are mature and evolving, growth or whatever, to these? So obviously the answer is we cannot, right? So clearly we have to operate within a certain risk parameter. So it's really, this is where we think of, okay, how do we play in the beyond, and how do we reimagine that we as banks can really come to the table and support this, because at the end of the day, it is going to impact us directly, right? So I would leave you with that challenge. And as I mentioned before, we did a survey of 25 CAB members, just looking at their websites, looking at annual reports. Of course, it's not complete, but it was really just a quick survey just to see, where banks are in terms of some of these value dimensions, right? And as I mentioned before, we have 50% on the people's side of sampled banks, of members on their management executive team being women, and only 23% women at the board level. We're seeing, not many banks have purpose statements. That is something that, but yeah, when we are seeing everybody, we have online, a lot of banks are using e-statements. So that is also a way of helping the environment, because there's less paper. A lot of CSR initiatives happening, But even on the CSR side, there's a challenge for us to, how can we really enable the beneficiaries of our CSR, activities and spend? can we play a greater part in really kind of, bringing them up, and whether it's support, in their organization, etc., rather than, just a situation where it's just, providing financial aid, which is great, but it's really taking it to a next level. So that was just a quick little survey we did here. Not very scientific, but I mean, it's what we had, just looking at publicly available information. So my last slide for today is this one. And the question is, what are we not seeing in this picture? So as we move to the beyond, and as we want to reinvent and reimagine the financial sector for the region, it's not business as usual, right? But how do we change our mindset? How do we change our perspective to go from what we are not seeing to what we can see, right? And I like what Joanna said about, let's take this collaboration further, because I really truly believe that the one disadvantage we have as, small island states is that we are small. And obviously, if you're small, you have to have all the paintbrushes together to make a beautiful painting, right? You can't have one paintbrush, struggling, right? So, the challenge is really for us as a region. How do we, given all the changes, because it is coming, it will come. Right? Gone will be the days when we don't have this correspondent banking issue, because I could sit here and wire or send money to a supplier, in the US or whatever. And, banks at the end of the day are intermediaries, right? So the question is the bank of today going to look like, what it is today, 20 years from now? And as we plan our transformation, are we taking that into consideration? So I thank you for your attention. And Wendy, I will allow you to take the floor, and I'll stop sharing.
All right. Wonderful, Gina. Thank you so much. I believe we already have a question queued, and I'm looking at the time, so perhaps we can go directly to that while I say that, Gina, you've shared quite a bit of thought-provoking information with us all this morning. There you go. So that kind of alludes to it. What are the top 3 areas that we as industry leaders should be paying close attention to?
Yeah. Yes. So definitely, I'm hearing an echo. Is that me or? Okay. Yeah, so definitely, I think one area that financial institutions need to consider is really supporting SMEs and entrepreneurs in the sustainability space, as well as others, right? Because in most economies, I don't think it's no surprise, they're really the engine room. And they were also the most affected from the pandemic. Now, there's a certain risk that comes along with SMEs, and I think that is where the collaboration could come on, because if we can all come together, right, and reduce our risk, but collaborate in terms of funding for the sector, and we can take it off balance sheet. I think that is definitely one way to kind of push the ball where that is concerned. I think another area as well is around, our people. I think, there is a lot of trends out there. The banking, I think, from a people perspective, people, hail out the healthcare workers, etc. But bank workers also really, stood up to the plate, right? So it's focusing on our people. And focusing from a wellness perspective, from a growth mindset perspective, in that really focusing on creating our replacements and creating legacies. I think as leaders, And leaders is not a title. I think as leaders, we should really every day be asking ourselves, what legacy will we leave? What legacy will we leave? And I think that is very important. And I think it has to be, if we can leave a legacy that is just beyond the bank and really into society and into the region, I think that that will be something that is also very good as well.
Okay, fantastic. And certainly, I think we would have heard that coming through yesterday as one of
Yes.
the strategic imperatives or focus areas for one of our member banks, who indicated succession planning is something that they are also looking at as part of their growth and viability. Gina, I want to thank you so much for being here with us this morning, and also invite the members of the audience who want to have deeper conversations to find Gina at the EY booth. Thank you for your sponsorship and your support to CAB, as you have done in the past. All
Thank
right,
you very
Gina,
much.
hopefully you
Okay.
will be able to take in some more of the day's events as
Yes.
well. All right, looking forward to chatting.
All
Take
right.
care and thank
Okay.
you.
Bye.
All right, great.